So let's just turn the brightness up. There we go. For the last few years, I've been investigating a set of crimes which involve some really serious and really cruel elements of criminality, and things which I can't really talk about on YouTube, and I don't really talk about around people that I know and love and respect, because it's not always appropriate, and a lot of people have been broadly affected and impacted by it. And one of the things that's important for us all to do is to sort of take ownership and authority for our own errors. And whilst I'm attempting to do that myself, take ownership and responsibility for my own moral failings, which are not irrelevant or in any way to be disregarded, I can't help but be befuddled, baffled, bemused, confused, and completely just aghast at the way that these set of criminals, they know who they are, you know who you are. You still seem to have this kind of sense that you're somehow in the right, or that that you're not just irrevocably fucked morally and ethically, and that you should just stop what you're doing and just, for fuck's sake, I don't know, it's incomprehensible to me. So I've done a bit of research and I'll open it for you. I don't know what the research says, but we're just going to open it and read it. I went on to Gemini and I put in this prompt: if a group of degenerates who have made a good living from torturing, defrauding and murdering innocent people, but they still in some manifestation of severe delusional myopia believe that they still hold some kind of absurd beliefs in their own moral and ethical superiority, or that their actions are in any way excusable, what kind of psychiatric or psychological disorder are they suffering from? And what advice could I offer them in order that they gain true perspective of their untenable subhuman atrocities and can begin to forgive themselves and initiate a process of emancipation, as opposed to being stuck in eternal patterns of systemic abuse and a lust for power, despite that tragic and harrowing human cost of their dysfunctional monstrosity? It researched about 250 websites. The paradox of moral superiority in individuals committing atrocities. The user's inquiry raises a profoundly disturbing question. What psychological factors might explain the coexistence of extreme cruelty, such as torture, fraud, and murder, with a persistent belief in one's own moral and ethical superiority, coupled with attempts to rationalise such heinous actions? Furthermore, the query seeks guidance on how to offer these individuals a path toward recognising the enormity of their transgressions, fostering self-forgiveness, and initiating a process of liberation from destructive patterns of behaviour and a relentless pursuit of power. This report will explore potential psychiatric and psychological explanations for this paradox, focusing on personality disorders characterised by the grandiosity and a lack of empathy, the cognitive mechanism of moral disengagement, and the role of cognitive dissonance in maintaining delusional beliefs. We'll also address the significant challenges inherent in attempting to facilitate genuine change in individuals inhibiting such deeply entrenched patterns of thought and behaviour. So this first bit talks about personality disorders characterised by grandiosity and a lack of empathy. Several personality disorders are marked by traits that could contribute to the disturbing phenomenon described. Among these, narcissistic personality disorder (NPD) and antisocial personality disorder (ASPD) stand out due to their core features of grandiosity, a diminished capacity for empathy, and a tendency towards manipulative and exploitative behaviours. Narcissistic personality disorder, the illusion of superiority. Narcissistic personality disorder is characterised by a pervasive pattern of grandiosity, a deep need for excessive admiration, and a lack of empathy for others. The user's description of individuals harbouring absurd beliefs in their own moral and ethical superiority directly aligns with the core feature of grandiosity in NPD, which involves an exaggerated sense of self-importance and a belief in one's own exceptional qualities. This inflated sense of self can manifest as an overestimation of one's abilities, influence, or power. Individuals with NPD often had have an exaggerated sense of their own accomplishments and may present as boastful and arrogant. Within NPD, the grandiose subtype is particularly relevant to the user's query. This subtype is characterized by overt grandiosity, tendency towards aggression, a profound lack of empathy, exploitative behavior, and boldness. The harmful actions described, torture, fraud, and murder, coupled with the belief in moral superiority, are consistent with the characteristics often seen in individuals with grandiose narcissistic personality disorder. Such individuals may overestimate their capabilities and influence to an extreme degree, potentially viewing their harmful actions as justified by their perceived superiority or as a necessary means to achieve admiration or power. A defining feature of narcissistic personality disorder is a significant lack of empathy, which involves an unwillingness to recognise or identify with the feelings and needs of others. The user's observation regarding the individual's failure to recognise the tragic and harrowing human cost of their actions strongly suggests a deficit in empathy. While some research indicates that cognitive empathy, understanding others' emotions, might be relatively preserved in individuals with NPD, affective empathy, that's feeling the emotions of others, is often significantly impaired. This impairment can allow individuals with narcissistic personality disorder to inflict harm without experiencing the distress or guilt that a more empathetic person would typically feel. Furthermore, individuals with NPD often exhibit a sense of entitlement, expecting special treatment and automatic compliance with their expectations, and may engage in the exploitation of others for their own personal gain. The user's mention of a lust for power and systemic abuse could be fueled by this sense of entitlement, where these individuals believe they have the right to control and harm others to achieve their objectives. Antisocial personality disorder, ASPD, disregard of and lack of remorse is basically what they used to call psychopathy and sociopathy. Antisocial personality disorder is another condition characterized by a chronic pattern of behavior that disregards the rights and well-being of others. The user's description of harmful actions and lack of concern for innocent victims strongly suggests the presence of ASPD traits. ASPD is defined by a lack of regard for morals, social norms, and the rights of others. These actions mentioned, torture and murder, represent extreme violations of these fundamental principles. A core feature of ASPD is a limited capacity for empathy and remorse. Individuals with ASPD may be more interested in benefiting themselves than in avoiding harm to others, and often display limited remorse for their harmful actions. The user's observation about the lack of perspective on their subhuman atrocities points to this absence of remorse. Individuals with ASPD may attempt to justify or rationalise their behaviour, often blaming their victims or external circumstances for their actions. Manipulativeness and deceitfulness are also common in ASPD, with individuals frequently exploiting, conning and deceiving others for personal gain or pleasure. The defrauding aspect of the user's inquiry aligns with these tendencies. People with ASPD can be adept at understanding and processing information about others, which can contribute to their ability to manipulate them effectively. Furthermore, individuals with ASPD may display arrogance and think negatively of others. The user's description of a belief in moral and ethical superiority could be linked to a general disdain for others, a characteristic often observed in ASPD. They may have an inflated self-image and hold others in contempt. The overlap and the concept of a narcissistic sociopath, the malignant combination. It's important to note that traits of both NPD and ASPD can co-occur in individuals. Whilst narcissistic sociopath is not a formal diagnostic term in the DSM, it is sometimes used to describe individuals who exhibit characteristics of both narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder. Such individuals may display a particularly malignant combination of traits, including manipulativeness, a profound lack of empathy, grandiosity, and an intense hunger for power and control. The convergence of narcissistic grandiosity and antisocial disregard for the rights and well-being of others could potentially explain the extreme nature of the behaviour described by the user, as well as the persistent and seemingly unshakable belief in their own superiority. A narcissistic sociopath might leverage their charm and charisma, narcissistic traits, to manipulate and exploit others without experiencing remorse or guilt, which are antisocial traits, all while maintaining a grandiose conviction in their own righteousness. So you've got a table here. First one says grandiosity. So in NPD, that manifests as an exaggerated sense of self-importance, belief in uniqueness and superiority, and in what they used to call sociopathy and psychopathy, They say that may display inflated self-image but less central than NPD. The need for admiration, strong in NPD, is a strong pervasive need for attention and praise, but in ASPD is less pronounced, focus more on personal gain and power. The NPD characteristics of empathy exhibit typically a lack of willingness to recognise or identify with others' feelings, while a psycho or a sociopath might have a limited capacity for empathy, so indifference to others' distress. They're broadly, they do kind of meet in the middle. Remorse may experience shame when exposed, but often rationalises actions, while the other will have a lack of guilt or remorse for harm that's been caused. Manipulativeness, so exploits others to achieve own ends, often for admiration, is what it says in the NPD bit. For our psychos, they exploit and manipulate others for personal gain, power, or even for pleasure. Deceitful, so they might lie to enhance their self-image if they've got NPD, or they might repeatedly lie or use aliases, conning others for personal profit or pleasure. Aggression can become enraged when not admired or criticised, and irritable and aggressive in sociopaths might engage, in physical fights or assaults. The motivation, seeking admiration, maintaining a superior self-image in NPD, and for our psychos, their personal gain, power, pleasure, and disregard for consequences. And the last bit of the table is social norms. So an NPD person might disregard norms if they conflict with their own sense of entitlement, and a psycho or a sociopath might have a pervasive pattern of disregard for and violation of social norms and laws. So the role of moral disengagement in justifying atrocities. Even when individuals engage in severely harmful actions, they may employ cognitive mechanisms to disengage from their own moral standards, thereby reducing feelings of guilt or self-condemnation. Albert Bandura's theories of moral disengagement provides a framework for understanding how individuals can justify or minimise the severity of their behaviour despite its morally questionable nature. Several mechanisms allow individuals to emotionally and cognitively detach from harmful consequences and actions. It doesn't really translate well into a video, me reading through this chart, but I'll just post a link to the chart and carry on with the diatribe of what it says. But there's a table about sort of various things: dehumanisation, diffusion of responsibility, advantageous comparisons, and how those mechanisms play out. And it does is relevant to my query as well, so yeah, make sure you have a look at that if you want to download this research. Individuals with NPD and ASPD might be particularly prone to utilising these moral disengagement mechanisms. The inherent lack of empathy in these disorders, coupled with a grandiose self-perception, could make moral disengagement even more effective in shielding them from the reality of their atrocities. For instance, a narcissist's sense of entitlement might lead them to believe that they're above conventional moral rules, while an individual with ASPD's lack of concern for others reduces their inhibitions against harmful actions. Moral disengagement provides the cognitive framework to support and rationalise these tendencies, allowing them to maintain a belief in their moral superiority despite their actions. Cognitive dissonance and the reinforcement of delusional beliefs. The significant contradiction between the individual's self-perception as morally superior and their actions of torture, fraud and murder likely creates a state of psychological discomfort known as cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance arises when an individual holds two or more contradictory beliefs, ideas or values. Most people strive for a consistent and positive self-image, and engaging in severely harmful behaviour while simultaneously believing oneself to be morally upright creates a strong internal conflict. To reduce this psychological discomfort, just have a sip of coffee. Individuals may employ various strategies. They might deny or minimise the severity of their actions or their negative impact on others. They could rationalise their behaviour by creating justifications, often drawing upon the mechanisms of moral disengagement discussed earlier. In more extreme cases, they might alter their fundamental beliefs about morality or the value of their victims, perhaps coming to believe that their victims deserve the harm or that traditional moral standards do not apply to them. Furthermore, individuals experiencing cognitive dissonance often seek out information that confirms their existing beliefs and avoid contradictory evidence, a phenomenon known as confirmation bias. This can lead them to selectively interpret information or surround themselves with others who share their distorted worldview, creating an echo chamber that further entrenches their delusional beliefs in their own moral superiority. Challenges and considerations in offering advice and facilitating change. So this is for you guys, really. It's kind of relevant to me as well, the more I read it, but I think it's definitely relevant to you, and you know who you are. Attempting to offer advice to individuals exhibiting these patterns of behaviour and belief presents significant challenges. Deeply ingrained personality traits and self-serving beliefs are often resistant to change. Individuals with MPD and ASPD typically lack insight into their own problematic behaviour and often externalise blame, attributing their difficulties to others. The lack of self-awareness makes it exceedingly difficult to initiate a process of gaining true perspective. Engaging these individuals in therapy is also challenging, as they may not believe they need help or may be manipulative within the therapeutic setting. Even when treatment is sought, often due to external pressures such as legal mandates, change is typically a gradual and slow process. The user's desire for these individuals to forgive themselves and initiate emancipation is a complex one. Self-forgiveness requires acknowledging wrongdoing and experiencing remorse, which are often lacking in NPD and ASPD. Emancipation from patterns of abuse and power seeking would necessitate fundamental shifts in personality and behaviour, a process that requires significant motivation and effort from the individual. Long-term specialised psychotherapy that focuses on increasing self-awareness, challenging distorted thinking patterns and fostering the development of empathy might offer us a potential avenue for change. However, success with such therapy is not guaranteed and requires a strong therapeutic alliance and realistic goals. Significant personality changes are inherently difficult to achieve. The concept of moral injury is typically discussed in the context of victims or those who witness morally compromising events. It's worth considering whether perpetrators might also experience a form of moral injury, I bet personally deeply buried beneath the layers of defence mechanisms and rationalisations. Even if not consciously acknowledged as guilt, their actions might create some level of internal conflict or distress. Finally, it's crucial to distinguish between mental illness as an explanation and as an excuse for harmful behaviour. While personality disorders and mental health are mental health conditions, they do not absolve individuals from responsibility of their actions. Understanding the psychological underpinnings of such behaviour is essential, but should not diminish the accountability of individuals for the harm that they've caused. Conclusion: the phenomenon of individuals committing severe atrocities and maintaining a belief in their moral superiority is a complex issue likely rooted in a combination of psychological factors. Personality disorders such as narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder, or a combination thereof, can contribute through grandiosity, a lack of empathy, and a tendency towards manipulation and exploitation. The cognitive mechanisms of moral disengagement allow these individuals to justify their harmful actions, minimise their severity, thereby preserving their self-image. Furthermore, cognitive dissonance can drive them to reinforce their distorted beliefs and resist any perspective that challenges their sense of moral superiority. Offering advice or facilitating genuine change in such individuals is exceptionally challenging due to deeply ingrained personality patterns, a lack of insight, and resistance to introspection. While long-term specialised psychotherapy might offer a potential path towards increased self-awareness and empathy, success is not guaranteed. Ultimately, while understanding the complex psychological factors at play is crucial, it's equally important to acknowledge the responsibility of individuals for their harmful actions and the profound impact of these actions on their victims. That was 251 websites. Kind of says it all in there, and some of that stuff I think might apply to me. I don't feel like a sense of grandiosity or entitlement. Like I still feel a kind of quite a deep sense of remorse, but like I think that both of us probably could benefit from the kind of purport of that document. And like, if you've done something really, really, really bad, trying to sort of like hold your head up high and kind of, use your perceived collateral as leverage while you carry on being a piece of shit is not like cool. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it's not, you're not well, like you're not all right still. You're really, not alright. You're still not alright, and you're never going to be alright until you kind of grow and recover and just wake the fuck up, you know, and just understand that, like, there's a Mitchell and Webb sketch, David, you know, Mitchell and Webb, the comedy TV show. You would have seen that in the text I sent to my brother the other day, and I hope you watched it. And so they're Nazis sat in a trench, and they say, and he's got his hat on, and he says, like, are we the baddies? Are we the baddies here? Like, and it's like, we've got skulls on our hats. Like, on the front of our hats, we've got little skulls. Like, the enemy, they've got nice things like eagles and stars and stripes. And why have we got skulls on our hats? Like, are we the baddies? Are we the baddies here? And like, I don't know how any of you can not, like, you started this fuckery of our family in the 80s, 1988. And various parties have joined forces and kind of like joined ranks of this group of kind of like amorphous, absolutely despicable, degenerate criminality. And like, I'm not saying that I'm innocent or that I'm morally superior for a nanosecond, but I am saying that I just, for fuck's sake, just look in the mirror and just write it all down. Like, write down all the, like, what are the worst things you've ever done? What harm have you caused to other people on purpose, in a premeditated and completely directed way, which you knew was going to only cause harm and was only ever intended to make you wealthy, gird your loins, or maintain your innocence? You know, if you kind of externalize these things, I don't see how you cannot be in a situation like, well, actually, I don't know what the fuck are we doing. Maybe we should just leave these innocent people alone, you know, stop being psychopaths, and, like, I don't know, open a florist or something, or like a bakery. I don't know. Like, I mean, like, I don't know what you know, you seem to be labouring under the misapprehension that there's something that's not abhorrently wrong about the way you've done business and the things that you're doing. And it's just like, people don't, like, it's not like you're stupid. Exactly. Like, it's not like you, I don't think you possess, you know, you have a lack of kind of like culpable psychological insight to be able to perceive that what you're doing is utterly wrong. But like, you judge a tree by its fruit, and like, it just, everything you do just smacks of kind of awful psychopathy and complete disregard for human emotion. And if you can't see that, then read the document and download it. I don't want to hurt anybody, and I don't, like, you know, I've got Stockholm syndrome. I don't really want to put anyone in prison either, you know, but I just implore you to try and have a little bit of dignity, respect for yourself, you know. Start with that, and, you know, maybe one day, you know, you'll be able to forgive yourself. You know, I don't expect you to forgive me, but I think that you probably gain a lot from forgiving yourself and just stopping this triad of sin and cruel crimes, because the race is long, and in the end it's only with yourself.